Greetings and welcome to the 2023 Black Sustainability Summit. My name is Myron Williams, and I've listened to parts in the past, but this is my first time fully participating in the summit, and I want to thank the organizers for this opportunity and all participants for listening and engaging in what I hope will be a dialogue that leads to more action on the topic. Share my screen. Towards a more circular economy, recycling organic waste into biogas and fertilizers. Contrary to what's written in my biographic and flyer, I'm still a professor at Clark Atlanta University, but I've been working for a few years with Felicia Davis and the HBCU Green Fund, which supported much of the work I'll describe. An outline of my presentation is here. I'll begin by mentioning some aspects of my own background and collaborators I've worked with, talk about the materials economy, population, energy, and fuels, and then focus on biogas and as an approach to circularizing and extracting value from waste biological material. I hail from the tiny island of Bermuda, which is located here in the North Atlantic. And although I won't talk about water catchment, I want to note that Bermudians have a lot of experience with water catchment, and I believe that there's a session in this conference talking about water catchment. I'd be happy to engage, although I'm certainly not an expert. My sort of professional biography is here. Did my Bachelor of Science in Microbiology at Howard University. I then spent a year traveling in Europe and West Africa, sort of a life-changing voyage. Then went on to do a PhD in biology at Massachusetts Institute of Technology. Postdoctoral research in New Delhi at the International Center for Genetic Engineering and Biotechnology, another in Athens, Georgia. And I've been a professor of chemistry at Clark Atlanta for 25 years. Most importantly, what I want to talk about is the past, in the academic year 2021-22, I was a Fulbright Fellow, a teaching and research Fulbright Fellow at two institutions in West Africa, the International Institute for Water and Environmental Engineering, or 2IE, which in Ouagadougou, Burkina Faso, which as the name implies, is a an international degree granting and research institution serving 13 Francophone countries in West and Central Africa. And I work with a group focused on sanitation. In Ghana, I worked at the Energy Center of the Kwame Nkrumah University of Science and Technology in Kumasi, but in both places, I worked primarily on anaerobic digestion for biogas production. I learned an enormous amount from my colleagues there, and I hope that I provided them and their students with some useful insights. I first heard of the idea of the materials economy by a video made about 15 years ago by Annie Leonard called The Story of Stuff. URL is in the bottom right here. Industrial economies function by a series of steps, including extraction of resources from the natural environment, production of goods from these natural resources, distribution of goods to consumers who use them, and then dispose of them. Each step generates waste, often toxic, that are released into the environment. This linear system has worked pretty well, at least it did when populations were small and consumption was small relative to the environment. But as populations and economies have grown, limitations of available material and increasing concentrations of toxins make this system unsustainable. It's impossible to continue to have exponential growth, which is the standard measurement of successful economies on a finite planet. What we need to be able to do in order to reform the global materials economy to a more sustainable system, we should try to make it more circular, where we substitute some of the extraction by recycling, convert the wastes and emissions into usable, and less toxic products. This is the approach we really need to take for all aspects of our economy, but I'll focus today on my area of expertise, which is biochemistry and the recycling of bulk biological material. Last November, the United Nations declared that the human population of the Earth had just reached 8 billion. The global population has doubled since 1974, it's about 48 years. And while the overall rate of growth is slowing down in most places, the projection for sub-Saharan Africa is that population will nearly double by 2050, less than 30 years from now. Clearly, the focus for Africa and people of African descent needs to include ensuring that African development and education systems are better positioned to take advantage of this growth and avoid the pitfalls of excesses and destructive extraction and waste. So let's talk about a couple of definitions. Waste is material that we've discarded after use. We think of it as unwanted and worthless. To move towards a more circular economy, we have to be clever and find value in what we used to discard. The three overlapping categories of waste: municipal solid waste, or MSW, wastewater, and hazardous waste. In the West, the US and Europe, MSW is the largest category. And as urbanization continues in Africa, it is a large and increasing share of waste. Further, food waste is, which includes materials lost from the farm, the market, kitchen, and dining rooms, is the fastest growing subcategory of waste. In the first generation of the recycling movement, we would describe recycling as reduce, reuse, and recycle. We've added at least three additional R's to this list, to this idea. Refuse, which is sort of to consciously opt away from purchasing unnecessary items. Repurpose, which we should celebrate our African traditions of making something out of nothing. And rot, which is to use biological processes to recover value from biological material. In addition to decreasing the cost of waste disposal and the release of toxics into the environment, we also want to recover valuable materials and energy from the waste. When we talk about energy, a fundamental tenet of chemistry and physics is that energy can neither be created nor destroyed, but only converted between forms. Kinetic energy is energy that's doing work, whereas potential energy carries the possibility to do work, or stored energy. In more common language, when we talk about energy, we're usually talking about some kind of potential or stored energy that we can access at will to do the work that we want, such as flicking on a light switch, pumping water, or starting a car. These days, electricity is often synonymous with energy. And sunlight, wind, and waves can be converted into electricity directly. But these sources are intermittent. And thus, some kind of energy storage in batteries or fuels will always be important. Carbon-based fuels are a subset of potential energy, are a form of chemical energy or materials that can store energy that can be released as heat and used for work by burning. That burning releases heat that can be used for some machine or some task, but also produces a greenhouse gas, carbon dioxide. Today, about 80% of the world's energy supply comes from burning of fossil fuels. Biomass fuels also produce carbon dioxide, but are renewable. Reducing greenhouse gas emissions is just one of the demands of the anti-climate change movement. And as we are we're motivated to decrease fossil fuel consumption, in part by increasing the use of biomass fuels as renewable energy resources. Fossil fuels represent carbon that was fixed by photosynthesis and buried underground more than 250 years ago during the Carboniferous era. That was before even mammals existed. Humans began using fossil fuels in significant amounts, beginning with at the beginning of the Industrial Revolution about 200 years ago, and we've increased that amount, resulting in excess carbon dioxide in the atmosphere and climate change. They're actually great fuels in a number of respects. They're very energy dense, which means that a small amount produces a lot of energy. And though they are no longer being made, and ducts are fixed in quantity, there's a lot of them. And as methods for extracting them have gotten better, they're cheap to produce. Coal is a solid fuel and thus easy to move around, but polluting. Oil, from which gasoline and diesel are fractionated, is a little harder to work with, but can be very effectively used in machines, such as automobiles and pumps. And natural gas, although it's even harder to use, is more efficient and cleaner. Biofuels are similar to fossil fuels, but they're derived from recently fixed carbon. And that carbon is part of the normal carbon cycle. Biofuels are also used by burning and burn to produce heat and carbon dioxide, but they don't increase the overall amount of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere, and thus we think of them as carbon neutral. They include traditional solid biofuels, such as wood and charcoal, but increasingly ethanol and biodiesel are used derived from cultivated crops. I obviously hold great hope for biogas, which can be made from waste, but there are aspects of the technology which remain to be developed or simplified. Both ethanol and biodiesel are drop-in biofuels. That is to say, they can be used in existing machines without much modification of the machine. And the gas you put in your tank today may contain ethanol that was grown this spring, thus again, recently fixed carbon. Big gas companies such as the Southern Company are also working on something they call RNG, or renewable natural gas, which is methane purified from biogas. This data on waste to energy is from the European Union. And you can see that Europe is way ahead of the US with more than 500 or nearly 500 large-scale multi-million-dollar waste-to-energy facilities in 2010, as the US only had 86. I would like to see more waste being converted to energy in the US, but since US American natural gas production has doubled in the past 15 years, I don't expect the industry to deliver much change. Ways of recovering energy from waste include pyrolysis-type process, like the tech that Joe James is speaking about also at this meeting. Use of waste rather than crop sources for production of diesel, biodiesel, and ethanol, and of course, biogas. Biogas results from the natural anaerobic decomposition of organic matter by microbes, which can occur in stagnant water, hence the name swamp gas, and in the guts of animals, especially ruminants like cows. In order to be able to use biogas, one either have to capture it, and this is an example of an Argentine research group trying to capture farts from cows. But more impactfully, we can create a gas-tight digester system that mimics the digestive tract. It's warm, which the microbes need warm temperatures. There's a place where you can input organic matters, here the manure inlet, and a place where you can collect the gas that evolves, as well as recover the effluent. Biogas is composed primarily of methane, CH4 gas, which is the burnable component, as well as other non-burning gases. And my initial interest in biogas was recovery of a clean burning fuel. It makes a nice blue flame that does not produce significant soot or toxins. However, there are some other outcomes of anaerobic digestion that add value. It provides a way to dispose of biological waste, which can be costly, especially in urban areas of Africa, and provides a way and it provides and reduces the damage that they could cause in the environment. In addition, we can recover a liquid effluent that is rich in plant nutrient compounds containing nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium, or NPK, as well as trace minerals that can be used as fertilizer. India and China lead the world in the use of this technology, with more than 400 million small-scale digesters operating in India and greater than 25 million in China. Much of the technology was developed in China, where use expanded rapidly in the 1970s, with another boost from legislation in the early 2000s that resulted in the enormous growth this century. Digesters can be constructed at various scales, from laboratory test vessels, and the system in this picture on the left you probably can't see very well, but there are a series of 250 milliliters flask digesters in an incubator and burettes to collect the gas. And this is a system that a CAU student, India Jeffries, was working on in my lab, to sort of household or community scale to industrial or municipal scale that process tens of thousands of cubic meters. Where biogas has been promoted in Africa, most of its development has been in rural communities, using underground brick and mortar digesters fed by animal manure. When I was in Ghana last year, as an exception, the government commissioned a large-scale electricity generation plant using multiple technologies, photovoltaic, pyrolysis, as well as biogas, that cost 6 million euros and was built by a German company. In the US, most biogas is obtained from two sources, wastewater treatment plants and landfill gas. On the left is a picture of the South River, part of the South River water treatment plant in Atlanta. It's about 2 miles from my house off Moreland Avenue. Also, if you drive by old landfills, you may see pipes sticking out of the ground like this on the right, where there are tubes buried deep in the landfill to extract gas that's being generated from organic waste buried years ago. The gas from these sources is typically used to run the facilities or wastefully flared off to reduce its greenhouse gas impact, since the major component, methane, is a greenhouse gas with more impact than carbon dioxide. Because I believe that size and distribution matter, my interest is in household or community scale digesters. Although centralized plants provide economies of scale, you build a single plant that covers this whole area, the raw materials to be processed in the plant must be transported over great distances. And these plants have a high capital cost and can only be built by governments or their entities with deep pockets. And they retain the control. Distributed facilities, in contrast, have a low barrier to entry. You can build a small digester at your house. Meaning, though, that if you have anyone with a few $1,000s can construct one, but to cover that same area, they're more expensive in total. Advantage, though, among the other advantages are that you don't have to transport your raw material over very large distances, and you retain control of the digester in your place. Control is retained in communities. In the African context, and perhaps in some of our more problematic diasporan communities, there is often inadequate infrastructure for waste collection. Waste is often discarded by the roadside, and that results both in unhealthy conditions and flooding potential. Bad roads and expensive transport hinders moving waste to centralized facilities and hinders the distribution of energy in the form of gas canisters. In addition, traditional uses of wood and charcoal for cooking cause both deforestation from the removal of trees and smoke that negatively impacts children's health. All of these impacts can be reduced using anaerobic digestion. Thus, my focus has been on the niche of smaller units at household or community scale that can ease waste disposal, provide on-site, provide cooking, fuel, and fertilizer at home. My focus has been on Africa, although I'm increasingly interested in how this technology can be deployed in Black and underserved communities in the US. But there are some challenges associated with this agenda. Despite biogas promotion campaigns in several countries, some of the barriers include that the process is still not widely known in sub-Saharan Africa. People are unaware that the technology exists or unclear about what it can do and what it's involved. Although not very expensive, you can get a unit for about $1,000 US. The existing household scale units are too costly for the average African urban household. Thirdly, there are challenges to the consistent functioning of the units. In terms of overcoming these problems, one aspect is to engage social and cultural workers in promotion to make them more visible and culturally sensitive dialogue about the benefits. Promoting local manufacture provides jobs and should ultimately lower the price barrier. And more consistent operation should be facilitated by academic level study that would include modeling and simulation of the complex biological processes needed and monitoring parameters and providing easy solutions to failure. I've been focusing on urban digesters because that's where most of the population is and where there's the most growth, where the waste infrastructure is already strained and expected to increase, and where building underground digesters or in-ground digesters is difficult, especially for renters. Thus, the focus has been on pursuing local design and build of cost-effective above-ground portable units. We began by purchasing kits from an Israeli company called Home Biogas and a Chinese company called Puxin. The home biogas kits were well-designed and easy to get up and running. The first we built in 2017 cost $1,900 and was placed at a guest house in Ghana. It functioned quite well for most of a year, but before the gas it produced would no longer burn and was effectively abandoned. The second unit we set up was in Senegal in 2021 with greater oversight. With the assistance of a local expert, it has been almost continually to date producing about 2/3 of the cooking gas needed for a family of 7. Promoting local manufacture remains important to me, and I worked with a Senegalese colleague who assembled a group of entrepreneurial-minded young people to build a unit based on public domains instructions and videos, such as the how to build a Solar Cities IBC tank biodigester. The group, which did not include any scientists or engineers, crowdfunded and built a unit, but they were never successful in getting gas production. The lesson learned here is that the enthusiasm of budding entrepreneurs can be powerful, but it's also necessary to have technical expertise as a backup. I've discovered recently that there are at least 3 African manufacturers making household scale units, and we've submitted a proposal to work with DAS Biogas in Ghana for wider distribution and data gathering around their units. When people focus on the energy output of anaerobic digesters, the other outputs of the systems are often ignored and not monetized. And that includes that nutrient-rich effluent. There's at least one company in Burkina Faso that is selling organic fertilizer and soil amendment derived from their anaerobic digester. The variability of that effluent and challenges associated with this output are not yet well characterized, but may be essential for viability of small-scale systems. So we've experienced firsthand that digesters can fail by not producing burnable gas or not eliminating wastes that can foul the environment. This is something that is documented in the industrial literature for large plants. It inspired my interest in understanding the microbial and chemical factors influencing successful operation, and especially gas production. The literature lists a number of measurable and impactful parameters, some of which are shown here. Some are important for energy recovery, marked with orange circles, such as methane, temperature, pH. Others are important for waste disposal, marked with the blue marks, the feedstock, BOD, VS, etc. And still others for their utility as effluent and fertilizer, nutrient concentrations, and some for multiple aspects of the process. The biological process that occurs in the digester is complex. An academic part of this project is to computationally model the process, which I began working with the Spelman student, Destiny Agumo, where there are at least 4 types of microorganisms involved, potentially hundreds of different species, conducting portions of a metabolic pathway that include hydrolysis, acidogenesis, acetogenesis, and methanogenesis. And again, what we're really trying to do is model and ultimately simulate this system to be able to predict pain points and how different impacts will result in the system. I'm also working with a group of engineers at Ashesi University in Ghana to design and build household scale units with real-time electronic monitoring of some of these parameters, namely pH, temperature, and methane concentration. They've also, so here's the unit that they've built. Here's the CAD diagram for that IBC-based unit. They've also built a cell phone app that provides the status of the digester over time, these different parameters it's recording, as well as the opportunity to input feeding parameters into the digester, and thus to be able to correlate what was put into the digester with what happens in the digester is kind of the goal. We hope this system will help us better understand how feedstock and temperature impact the function of these small, low-tech, unstirred digesters. Looking beyond Africa to the US market, there was briefly a company making household scale units in Eugene, Oregon. They began in 2014 with a crowdfunding campaign, but kind of as a cautionary tale, they were out of business by 2019. I would love to find collaborators in our communities who could help us adjust the model to fit our infrastructure and climate. With warmer average temperatures, the South is more amenable to unheated anaerobic digesters than the Northeast, although it's perhaps a less environmentally conscious community. So going forward, what we'd like to do is mount several more public-facing digesters so that more future users can be exposed to the technology. We've proposed to do this around Accra, Ghana, and we'd like to extend to Senegal and Kenya, either in homes, schools, markets, restaurants, or small farms. Domestically, we'd like to set up some here in Atlanta, Truly Living Well, and these will serve to promote the technology and expand the possible consumer base, as well as to help understand the parameters that impact their functioning. From these and prior installations, we'll examine the performance to find the right size and culturally responsive maintenance instructions so that alternate waste disposal, so that people won't need additional waste disposal mechanisms or additional gas supplies. Local manufacturing and repair skills remain of high importance. as well as strategies to most impactfully use the effluent. So integration with urban agriculture, I'm interested in hydroponics, will be something I want to try to address as well. And thinking about a business model for both manufacturing, selling, or renting to own these units, and the scale and adjusting the scale to meet potential markets are all areas that we like to address. Of course, funding is central to any of this. We're currently seeking grants funding, but ultimately we'd like to work with investors and, again, collaborators, engineers, makers, builders, to help us develop this process. Okay, finally, I want to note some related activities of the HBCU Green Fund. They include a network of climate advocates from all over Africa and the diaspora, the Sustainable Future for African Diaspora Network, and includes virtual pre-COP conferences. The COPs are big UN-sponsored conference of parties meetings where agreements like the Paris Accords or the Kyoto Protocols were decided on. In order for grassroots African activists and social entrepreneurs to be heard, our pre-COPs are virtual forums where they can report on climate-associated challenges in their communities, as well as innovative solutions and mitigation. Last year's conference is mostly available on YouTube at the URL indicated here, and this year's will take place on October 26th to 29th. We'd love to have members of this audience participate. Please check the HBCU Green Fund website, link indicated at the bottom, in the coming weeks for more detail about when this will occur. In addition, we have an AUC, Atlanta University Synergy Energy Fellows program. Both of the students who I described working on projects with me were Energy Fellows. And we recently, or HBCU Green Fund recently received a grant from the Bezos Earth Fund for greening West Atlanta, and Truly Living Well is one of the partners in that initiative. Okay, finally, in summary, I didn't mention the HBCU Eco Spring Break, where we took a group of young people during spring break in March last year in 2023 to plant trees in northern Senegal, the Senegal-Mauritanian border. We hope to continue the program this coming March 8th to 17th in Ghana at the Kweku-Ando Sustainability Institute, where students will work and learn up in Volta region in Ghana. And again, you should be able to see something about this on the website going forward. Finally, in summary, population and economic growth demand new and more sustainable systems for material use. Anaerobic digestion offers environmental, energy, economic, health, and agricultural benefits. Disseminated small-scale digesters can offer local resilience and require less infrastructure, but widespread use will require greater education and cultural integration, local capacity to manufacture and service low-cost devices. And I believe that monitoring, modeling, and simulation may promote more effective and efficient systems at low cost. Okay, I hope that you have questions, comments, critiques, or especially a desire to collaborate that we can address live after this recording, or with which you can reach out to me via email. Thank you, and hope to speak with some of you soon.